I'm going to start the recording and I'm going to share my screen. And just to look at the agenda, let me know, give me a thumbs up if everybody can see the screen, because you know, this is Zoom. I've been with this Teams, man, going back and forth. So our objectives is to, based on school data, we're going to collaboratively choose a problem of practice to improve student learning and or well-being. So it can be something around social emotional also, because we know kids are struggling with those social emotional components. Then we can look at that too. We're going to agree upon that, and we're going to come up with an agreed upon strategy to address the problem of practice. And we want to come to consensus about that. So, and that's going to be something, you know, I'm facilitating. This is going to be something that you guys are really going to come up with. Norms of mute your microphones when you're not talking, be present and engaged. That's a big one. Like, I really want your input. I really want to hear what you have to say. Be respectful of all group members, because we may not always agree with what each other say, but you know, that respect goes a long way. Ensure and respect confidentiality. Again, what we talk about in here stays here. Cameras on, be on time. So thank you guys for, again, coming and participating. Just, can I get everybody just to state your name and then like your grade level?
Nathan Minima, 4th grade.
Deirdre Wyrick, 1st and 2nd autism.
Kahua Moa, kindergarten.
All right. So I don't know if Ms. Moore, if Kahua ever had a chance to look at the vision and mission and the data that we have, but I have some data just to kind of to remind us so we can actually use that data if we want to. My thought was, we're in a different time right now with COVID-19. And so because we're virtually learning, doing virtual learning right now and virtual teaching, there are issues that are specific to those issues. So we're gonna have a little discussion around what those issues are and try to come up with identified problem of practice. So I'm going to stop sharing. Well, actually, make sure you see the full. So this is kind of the agenda, and I want to, again, honor your time, because I know long day, end of the day. Last time we did this on Monday, and we discovered that wasn't a good day to do meetings on Mondays. Fridays and Mondays are a no-go. So you may not have brought any data because that's extra stuff to do, and I understand that. But if you have something in your mind that you've been thinking about that your students are struggling with in this virtual setting, those are kind of things we're going to talk about. So we're going to try to identify the problem of practice. And I put some examples: attendance, iReady results, engagement, including challenges that could be specific to virtual learning gaps. I want to go back and stop sharing this, and then I'm going to share what our mission and our vision are. And actually, I'm going to share the data first. So this is just kind of a snapshot of what our data looked like over the past 3 years. So we have ELA here, and you know what our English language learners have done of socioeconomically disadvantaged, students with disabilities. And that's under the area of ELA. And then we have suspensions, which we probably don't need to look at too much as far as what we're doing. And then we have math. And of course, when I was looking at this data, I was looking at anytime I see 16.67% met in an area, then all of a sudden I see 0, 0. percent met. That's always eye-opening. But to me, honestly, all of this is eye-opening because I don't believe we should be leaving any kids behind. And if we have 36.54 who are meeting, exceeding, there are a lot of kids that are not meeting and exceeding. So just kind of like just some data. The attendance is not on here. I don't know how you all are doing with your attendance. So that could be something that we look at. I'll leave it right there for a second so you can kind of look at it. And that's just the ELA at the top. And as you're looking at the data, I want you to kind of, if you can, I want you to be thinking about, do you think in this virtual setting, are some of these gaps going to increase or are they going to shrink? So that's for our ELA, and then I'll scroll down a little bit if it's okay. If it's not, you want me to stay up there? Cool. It looked like you were still reading it. I'm sorry. And you can always chime in and tell me what do you. I know Nathan talked a little bit about it of last time, but all parties weren't here last time. You know, tell me what your thinking is when you see the data. And there's no raising your hand. It's only 4 or 5 of us. So just kind of give me some feedback of what you see with the data and how can that play into like where we are now.
Well, in terms of suspensions, I mean, I haven't really heard much talk about it, but being in this virtual setting, I can see the suspension rate changing drastically because we're not in space with each other.
So do you think of the suspension rates may change, but do you think some of the behavioral issues change as well, or you had, so explain that a little bit more.
Well, if you're looking at overall suspensions and you're just looking at the data and rate, based on what we see here, this is based on, you know, the face-to-face normal school that, you know, we're used to. But now that we're in a virtual setting, like I said, I haven't really heard much discussion about suspensions. I know for a fact there's behaviors that are still present, but there's a lot, how can I say this? There's a lot that's beyond our control, and I don't know, because there's not a lot of discussion. Like, I haven't really heard Brookins talk about it much, so I don't even know where his thought process is about it. But I haven't heard suspensions because students refuse to be online, or suspensions because they're acting up. So I just don't see that really affecting much. If anything, it'll just improve the scores, but it's just, I know it's going to be a lot of inaccuracy. You know what I mean? A lot of inaccurate data, just because it's like the behaviors are there, but because it's beyond our control, they're not going to deal with it.
I noticed there's a lot more behavior virtually than there is when we are in the classroom. Like, I think it's a matter of the environment. I noticed at home there's less control, like kids kind of run the household, so to say. So I haven't heard anybody suspended at all for anything. I did hear a story of like an example of suspension where a child was showing a gun during, you know, their virtual classroom learning, and a child did get suspended for that, but that was on the news, but not as far as Kirk-wise or during for our school or anything of that sort. I haven't heard of, but I know it's definitely the behaviors are still there.
Do we see that as a problem or practice still in our schools? So assuming that's what the, you know, my wonder is if we are going into purple, if we stay purple, I mean, I'm thinking worst case scenario, we stay purple and we got 3 or 4 kids that are disruptive in the classroom. What are we, you know, what are we looking at? Are we looking at, I know we kind of don't want to look at suspension because that, I think what Ms. Reyes is saying and Ms. Kahua, if we're being honest, this really doesn't play into what we're doing right now virtually. So what about the math and English language arts? So how do we see this data? So say for instance, English language learners, you know, you're looking at the data and they've improved over the last 3 years. So do we see, you know, with ELA and with, you know, math, you can see some trends. Do we see those trends getting better or worse?
The results here are off the SBAC, right?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Quick question, is there SBAC this year? Really?
I was gonna ask the same thing.
Okay, I was like, you're shaking your head like, yes. I was like, oh. Okay. I really, honestly, like, I know everything is skewed. I am worried looking at our data. I feel like if it shows that we've increased, I don't think it's a real actual representation of what the students really do know. Because we know how iReady went already.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, this is kind of hard. It's good that we're seeing increases, like every year we're increasing, you know? But I don't know if the data is really reliable for this school year. I would not rely on the data at all. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I would anticipate it being hard to get an increase for this school year, just because there's added barriers for both things, right? When it comes to math, you know, when it comes to math, like there's a fight to get students to show their work, but you're handing them, you know, pieces of paper and stuff. And with this, there's just a whole nother layer where even if you get the students paperwork, you've got to teach them how to take a picture of their work and put it into the document that you want to give them. And then when it comes to reading, you know, there's a lot of work that you put in just getting your students to make sure that they read the story that, you know, they're supposed to be quizzed on. And now, again, with distance learning, we've given them some of their books, right? But I can't make sure that a student opens up that story that we're reading and uses it to find text evidence. So I would just anticipate, given those barriers, that that would lead to some poor, or not necessarily poor, but just lessened academic practices that lead to success on the part of our students. That's brought about through technological barriers, right? There's already a challenge that's there, and now you're gonna add on to that, like, hey, I know for some of you, it's already hard to understand what you're reading. Can you also understand how to find it online too? So that's kind of like another barrier that I could see leading to a drop in numbers.
I like that because, and Kahua talked about, you guys are talking about the data is this data, and we kind of talked about this last meeting, Kahua, how the data doesn't necessarily, it's already kind of unreliable at times, especially when we looked at like suspension rates, because Ms. Reyes was even talking about there were times where kids were actually placed in her class for suspension, for in-school suspension. And those things might not have been counted on here. But this is a whole unique year. So one of my suggestions would be, let's go with something that's specific to virtual learning and not necessarily this data. I just wanted us to kind of take a look at this. So this is the one, and this is the one I really want to go back to and I want to look at, because this is what we say we're about. So this is what we say we're about: providing a safe environment where the student can develop the academic, social skills necessary for them to reach their fullest potential. So as independent thinkers, problem solvers, and lifelong learners. And of course, I get caught on words. So when anybody says every student, you can't have half of them being successful and mean every student. 50% looks good compared to 20%, but it's still 50%. So this is our vision and our mission. So some ideas, because I keep hearing engagement. And so are there identified kids in the classroom who are really tough to engage right now?
RSP students. If there's a student that's RSP or has an IEP plan, for either students in my class and George's, their participation in class is very low, and for George, he has some students where they don't even come to class.
So
In kindergarten, mine is kind of different because it's more of the parents that if the parents don't get the kindergarten kids on, or, you know, if the tablet's not on, and if I call them and they can't pick up because they don't know how to do it, that's my issue with participation and engagement. It's not the students, it's the parents that are, you know, prepping their kids every day, making sure the tablet's on, ready to go. That's kind of my issue right there.
Mine are a combination of both, because, you know, my students, they do have special needs and cognitive delays. So engagement has already been an issue prior to school closures, but now my parents have become my paras. So if I don't have the parent support, then it's literally impossible to fully engage my students. So for me, it's a combination of both.
So I hear engagement, but I'm gonna ask a question, because as I'm listening, when I hear RTI, some of the kids who need different services, also hear, like, so you were saying that some of the kids don't even show up. So is attendance for certain kids who are struggling with engagement, not the whole class, but is attendance an issue for some of those kids who are not showing up or who are struggling academically? Is attendance an issue? I know Ms. Moore is saying the parents have a lot to do with that. Or is it just the engagement part the parents have a lot to do with, and they're showing up, but they're not engaged?
Oh, you could go, Nathan.
For me, it's students. My students show up, but some of them don't engage. So they're there, but they're just not participating.
My students show up. Most of the time they are participating. There's a few that there's a handful that I can think of that even up to this school year, they have never had their cameras on. So it's like, I don't know if they're there or not, but for the most part, they're there. They're engaging, participating somewhat.
For my student, it varies. I noticed at the beginning of the school year, I had a little more support with both, you know, the parents, but now it's getting to the point where the parents are tired because they do have to be with my students all day long. And my students also have behavior. So if they had a bad day, bad morning, and it's just not working for them, they will fight with the parents, and the parents just don't want to fight with them.
I will tell you though, I've got really creative and I wish I had like some kind of way to take data on this somewhat, but I've gotten my students to really be active participants by just doing little things like, guess which hand the rock is in, or when the first one to finish their work, like show it to me on your whiteboard and you get to guess. Like these just little things that I've been just trying to test out, and it's been working really well. So that's one of my little celebrations if we're talking about like participation and engagement. I don't know if it'll work in the upper grades. I'm sorry for you guys, but it works super well in kindergarten and the kids love that.
Well, that's what we want to talk about. So I think engagement is definitely a challenge. I have engagement issues, and we would think by this time, like, if we were in face-to-face learning, most of us would have those relationships, and we would have all that down. And you may have, I think I have 24 students, and out of 24 students, I may have 2 that are not really engaged. Now, right now I'm looking at maybe half of them that are hard to see, hard to gauge, especially with that formative assessment piece, where you're supposed to be checking for understanding as you're going along. But to Ms. Kahua's, to Ms. Moore's point, what can we do? What are some strategies that we can come up with? And I wouldn't say try to address the whole group of kids that are struggling with engagement. But what can we do where we can pull 1 or 2 kids, just 1 or 2 kids that are having troubles with getting them engaged? What are some strategies that we can use, or 1 or 2, and narrow it down? What are 1 or 2 strategies we can use and try? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at those kids and like their attendance percentage. They're at the 86 mark versus maybe Nathan. All the rest of your kids are at 96, and these 1 or 2 kids are, if you really look, they're lower, they come late, whatever it is. What are some strategies that we can use just for those couple of kids, and apply those strategies and then see if there's improvement in their engagement? And then, when we come back and meet the next time, we can talk about, okay, and you know what, they're showing up and they're getting better academically, or we're doing this and like nothing's happening. It's like, it's still the same thing. So just a little conversation about what could we apply as a strategy that will work for Mr. Minima, Ms. Reyes, and Ms. Moore. Like, as far as this is not specific to K, and this is not specific to 6th grade or 5th grade. This is something that any teacher could use, because we're going to use this as a model. The floor is open.
So are we going to focus on engagement and participation?
Well, let's come to a consensus. Is that something we want to look at, engagement and participation? Now, are they the same thing? That would be my wonder, and my question is, is participating and engagement the same to everybody?
I think I can participate, but not be engaged, right? I don't know. I mean, it's like it's interchangeable, but you can participate and not be engaged, but you would have to engage to participate, right?
That sounds about. So I can put stuff in the chat, or I can respond to something, but it may not be back and forth. If I get stuck, I'm not asking questions. So I'm there. I say good morning. I say see you later. I do whatever it is I need to do, but I'm not asking questions. When I get stuck, I'm not asking for help. I'm not being a part of all of it. I pick and choose, kind of what I get to go into. But I just asked the question because I want to make sure we understand, whatever we go forward with, that if we're looking at participation and engagement, if we're looking at it the same, that's fine. If we look at it as interchangeable, that's cool. As long as we define that like up front and say, hey, these are two things that we're going to look at, engagement and participation, and we're going to look at them as interchangeable.
All right, and also attendance. Do you guys have attendance issues in your classroom? Is that something we want to focus on too? Because I know like one thing, I've had a couple of students who I just like, okay, made phone calls. I've gone to the homes, no responses, nothing. I told admin and still no response. So what do we do with those kids, I don't know. So that's another thing I would like to focus on, either attendance or this, whichever works.
Well, we're also looking, attendance is huge because I know, at least in our data chat, which I'm pretty sure is the same questions he asked just about everyone, talking about attendance, what are we doing to increase attendance for the students who aren't attending regularly, how are we contacting the parents, are we doing home visits? So it seems like as a whole, attendance is, and I know it's on Brookings' radar, and I also know, like just talking to a lot of teachers, it is huge because of course, if the student's not online, then they're not learning. So all this means nothing.
Nathan?
I'm more in like participation and engagement. I have like maybe currently one student who has, they kind of fluctuate. I would say I have 3 students that over the course of the school year have struggled with attendance, and currently 1 who is going through a poor stretch of attendance, and I've reached out to the parents with no change. So attendance would be helpful, but I think for me, also that participation and engagement strategies and what the thing, like the flip side is attendance would be easy for us to measure, right? The thing we need to discuss if we want to do participation and engagement, how are we going to measure those students, like measure improvement, right? What's our baseline for that? Like so-and-so participates like once a week and we want to get him, talking at least, this many times or something like that. Like, so there is the benefit of attendance is, we can have some easily tangible measures versus we'll have to think about what do we want to, if we are going to focus participation and engagement, like what's our criteria to, measure that.
Really, really good point. I will say that that's doable. And even as something as easy as a checklist, just giving check marks or tally marks and say, hey, I typically get a response from this kid about this many times per week. What can we do to increase those check marks, whether it's incentives, whether it's, whatever. I don't want to come up with the strategy. I will say though, what I'm hearing is they got to be there in order to get to the engagement or participation piece. And as we did our data chats today, and I looked at my attendance before I had mine this morning, I was like, oh, good. And then I saw there was one that was like at 65% and it was going down. And so for me, that would be the one I need to look at. But then when I look at her achievement, when I look at her participation, when I look at all those other things, they're all low. iReady, how many lessons she's doing in iReady, doing her asynchronous time, all that stuff. So there's a correlation there. So what we may be able to do later is start figuring out and seeing, just like when you look at the data, that this thing affects this thing, affects this thing. So one gap is not just a gap in isolation. That gap has created other gaps. So I like, yes, let's look at participation and engagement, but I think they can both be coupled together with attendance, because attendance is that easy, let's look and see, okay, if this person has high attendance already and their participation is low, then we may have to look at that as a different dynamic. But most of the time, if the engagement is high, they're in class. So I like that component, but I'm not the one, you know, I'm more the facilitator. I'm not going to make the decisions, because even though you're the one supposed to be implementing this, I'm going to implement these things in my classroom also, because it's best practice and it's what's best for kids. So again, while I'm thinking about that 64, 65% kid in attendance, where all the rest of them are at 90 and 100%. So that may mean I need to reach out more or use Class Dojo. I'm not big on Class Dojo because all my parents are not there, but some people use that more efficiently. You know, you can do the messenger calls of one-on-one sessions where you make sessions or I know Nathan is really good at creating channels and rooms and different things like that, and buy-in of. So what's your thought? Connecting attendance with engagement, and we can do something as easy as, again, I don't even think you got to create one. Like you could create like 2 columns and just put the kid's name in there and just do tally marks. And you can pick 1 student, 2 students, and that's it. Not trying to do the whole class, 1 or 2 students, and we pick something that we think will work as far as a strategy and engagement, whether it's one-on-one, scheduling a one-on-one time with this student, even if it's during synchronous time. So I'm just throwing some ideas out there.
I think that's simple enough, you know, just doing a quick tally marks, just checking on, not the whole class like you said, but just 1 or 2 students who you feel like are not in, could you see them bump up their engagement in the classroom? I think that's doable. I can think of a couple of students on the top of my head right now who I could do that with.
Same, I like the tally mark for a couple of students. I have some students that come to mind, and even thinking of translating what Kahoot does with that little just reward system. Like, I know there's gotta be, you know, a little something for 4th graders that you can throw at them that motivates them to engage and participate too.
Rock, paper, scissors. That works too.
Actually, no, I would like, that's actually really simple. And I know if I was like, okay, whoever is first gets to play me in rock, paper, scissors, would
and like even to just motivate the next students, like, okay, even though he got first, whoever's next, I'm ready for you. And they're just like, okay, they're just rushing to get it done. Like,
even challenge having students go against other students, because then they're gonna have to turn on their camera, right?
That's good.
That
I never thought of that. I'm gonna try that one, Nathan.
Mm-hmm.
Do like a rock, paper, scissors battle, so to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I even have like this is kind of like the PE too. Like loser does like 5 push-ups or jumping jacks, or it's not like loser, but it's like, all right, let's see who the kids will go against each other. Like the first one to guess, so it's 2 + 3, and they'll hold it up. Okay, you got it right, you got it wrong. Now you go and do 5 jumpings, and they have their cameras on, and they're just like, oh man, we want to see you do it. So just little things like that. It's so little and simple, but they get their cameras on and they engage.
Ms. Reyes, would this be something that will be possible with your students?
I'm just trying to think, because of course, yeah, it will be possible. I'm just trying to think as for the tally marks, because there's different levels of engagement. There's an engagement of, remaining online, because for a lot of my students, it's just hard for them to just be in one spot for even 10 to 15 minutes, because they're used to, rotating stations every 10 minutes. What we measure is the like prompting level. So say, for example, we look at circle time, or math instruction, ELA instruction. We look at what level of prompting did they need to be successful. So did they need a verbal prompt? Did they need a physical prompt or assistance from the parent? Were they able to do it independently? So that's when, in terms of engagement, that's usually what we look at. So it will work. I'm just trying to see if it's something that, like, because you said we all have to do the same thing, right?
But Dee, I think yours can even be like, okay, they're on for like 3 minutes right now without distractions. Maybe next time they're on for like 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be, I think it doesn't have to be exactly like what the other grades are doing, because I know your kids have a harder time sitting still and being in one spot. So I think just being, okay, okay, he's here right now for 3 minutes. Wow, today he's able to do it for 5 minutes, so to say.
Yeah, because I have students that, like, they can be in front of the computer. It's just like, I have a student, he'll be in front of the computer, but he's playing with toys. But parents not there. So, trying to be creative where it's like, hey, want to watch Peppa Pig? Like stuff like that. It's literally just being creative, and sometimes it changes where Peppa Pig doesn't work one day and something else works another day. So it's a lot of inconsistencies.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's not about necessarily doing the exact same thing, because you have to curtail it to what your kids' needs are. So we don't ever want to lose sight of that. But what we're saying is, like, what is it? Because engagement is going to look different. Like what engagement is, because if you got kids that are not turning their screens on, and now all of a sudden these kids turn their screens on, that's a huge step, because you get to look at their faces and see if they're not getting something. Now you have a level of engagement that almost matches being in the classroom, because now you're getting the nonverbal stuff. Oh, they look lost, okay? But also using the chat as a area, or again, during normal instruction, I'm gonna set aside 20 minutes per day or whatever. And I'm just throwing out a synopsis and an idea. I set aside 20 minutes for this one student, that while these kids are working independently, I'm gonna pull this student over here to the side, because during asynchronous time, they're nowhere to be found. So I'm gonna pull this kid aside, and I'm gonna invite them to my office hour or whatever, and we're gonna work on something that I looked at in iReady, or something I know they need to work on, and I'm gonna try to make it fun. So we're gonna do a game, rock, paper, scissors. If you get this is what we're doing, you and I. And then we're gonna go to the main screen, and we're gonna say, hey, you know what, so-and-so beat me in rock, paper, scissors, because he's just better than me, whatever. But these are, in order to get the engagement up, sometimes it's about the connection, because we don't have the physical connection anymore. And that hurts a lot of these kids. That social emotional part, being able to see Mr. Minimal, being able to see Miss Reyes, being able to see Miss Moore and all her, all her clothes and her outfits and all these other things. Like, the kids miss that part, and they don't have that now. And some kids do much better with that part than other kids do. Some kids are really struggling with that part. And so what they have done is they've gone into a hole. And so how do we get them out of that hole? Because if this continues, we can't assume that this is just going to be a quick thing that's going to go away. So I hear engaging in fun activities. So those fun activities, can we, I don't want to say let's do rock, paper, scissors, because, that's going to work with some people. But so what do we, some games. So I like the idea of games. I would say whatever games you play with the kids to try to get these one or two that you've identified engaged, just write down at the top of your tally mark or your whatever your engagement strategy is. So if it's rock, paper, scissors, or it's pulling out and doing individual work. For example, I've noticed that when I take one of the actual iReady lessons for the kids and I go back with them and walk them through something that they got 40% on, when I walk them through and reread and show them those skills for rereading and stuff like that, they're like, oh, I answered the wrong one last time. Yeah, but it's just because they didn't reread. And that's what's cool about it, is I get to walk back through the very lesson that you didn't do well on, and I get to reteach you that lesson or do something more fun, because these are upper grades, but for lower grades, making sure they're fun, making sure they're engaging. But there's, it's just, and here's the other part. This is not about picking something that's guaranteed to work. This is about doing something different. And if it doesn't work, then that's okay. But when we know that we got those 2 or 3 kids that are not engaged, we have to put some interventions in place. This is not about coming back and saying, oh, it worked, everything worked. No, it's about saying, yeah, that worked for me, but it didn't work for Mr. Minimal's class. Or Ms. Reyes come back and said, it doesn't work for my SPED kids as well. I tried it, but my SPED kids are not buying in. So it doesn't matter, like just a sheet, and you can keep it on the computer. You're gonna keep, start keeping tally marks. And I would say, as your baseline, kind of just think about how many times that these kids that you've identified are actually engaging. And so now, I would say, let's try to check back in with each other. And this time of year, the kids get, we know it's that time of year, everybody's a little different, right before Thanksgiving. And when we come back, I think it's like 2 weeks, and then it's time for Christmas break. Just kind of start keeping your data of this week, tomorrow, next week. Just say, this kid usually participates in, this many times. You can look on your actual atlas, that front page, and it tells you kind of the attendance breakdown and who's, so you can look and see if there's a correlation between their and just write it, their attendance and their engagement. You can look and see if there's any type of correlation. Put your little note at the top, and then just start saying engagement, and keep a little running tab and see if there's any improvement and what your strategy is. So you can put your strategy up there last, but make sure you put, what are you using differently now to engage the kids than you used before? And of maybe, what is 2 weeks? Let's look at about 2 or 3 weeks from, because we got next week off. So I mean, yeah, next week off. So those 2 weeks, so like right before we go on break, we'll have like a 30 or 40 minute quick Zoom meeting, looking at the data, say, hey, do you see any improvements? And we're gonna talk more, just like a little short period of time. What strategies are you using? What engagement tools are you using that you didn't use before? And I'll send out a link for that. What do
How
we?
many, Jacques, and Deidre, Nathan, how many students do we kind of want to keep tabs on, so that, are we just doing whatever, or are we gonna like do the same amount of students, or just so that I know kind of where to start or how to start? What do you guys think?
I would say, just so it doesn't become overbearing, I would say no more than 2.
And Jacques, when you're
Sorry.
sorry.
I was gonna do a high, medium, and low, but like, if it's okay with you, I would like to kind of do 3 just to see like how it goes.
That's totally fine. I just don't want you to get overwhelmed with more than you kind of have to, because if you want to do 3, then that's fine. You want to do a high, medium, low, however you want to do that. Just keep a note for me to let me know, like, I did a high, medium, and a low, and this was my high, medium, and low, and kind of outline it. But I would say no more than 2. 1 or 2 identified students to use the strategy with. Go ahead, Ms. Reyes.
So when you're talking about like tally marks, I just want to make sure I'm getting it right. So we're documenting if the student's engaged.
Yeah, so you say, for instance, you have a student that is not visible online, right? And you do something and you say, hey, if you show your face on the camera and I get to see you, then we gonna for every 10 minutes you work, we got this game that we gonna do. Okay, or your parent does that. So there's 0 tally marks, because normally this kid never gets online. They never show their face. So now this student starts showing their face more, and you're gonna give them a tally mark every time they show their face. So it's just as an example. So that would be engagement for that student, because that student's baseline is they never show their face. Now, if a kid already shows their face, you're not going to give them a tally mark for something that they already do, because they're already engaged that way. So for them, their tally mark may be responds to prompts. So now I have kids that I say, hey, Genesis or so-and-so, do you understand do you understand the direction? So I'm looking at all the names, because there are not a lot of faces up. And so I talk to them, but some of them won't respond back. So now when you start getting a dialogue going and they start responding either via chat, or now you know that they're listening, they're paying attention, they haven't walked away from their screen, and they just have a blank screen on with their name up. Does that make sense? Is that a little clearer?
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just trying to think of my kids, because I'm kind of limited, because right now I have 6 on my caseload, but 3 are actually coming consistently. So I'm kind of limited on students. And I'm trying to think, like, I have a student in mind. My student always plays with toys during instruction. So I know for a fact I can use him, but I'm just trying to figure out like how I can document the data. Because I mean, I document data on him every day, but how I can document where, I can have an accurate baseline, because he is online just about every day. So attendance is not an issue really. It's just engagement. And then I have another student where he needs basically full prompting from a parent to be engaged, but that's just his cognitive ability. And then my other one's pretty independent. And those are the 3 that are online consistently. So I'll strategize about it, and then I'll just ask you.
So you may have the one that's already online, but you want them to show more and you may have your one with the toys, even though he's on. Now his prompt and his engagement is when he's not interacting with the toys and he's interacting with you.
Mm-hmm.
So now a tally mark may be, man, he's with a toy 90% of the time. Like he won't pay attention 90% of the time. And then whatever you've implemented that's new, you see now that 70% of the time he plays with the toy. Now 30% of the time he's engaged. So that's a check for those 30%. That's his improvement, because you have 3 kids at 3 different levels. One is online and works independently. So even the one that works online, you know, hypothetically, you can stretch, you can extend his learning.
Okay.
But we're looking at the ones who are the challenge areas. So we want to look at the ones who are struggling.
Okay.
And then how can we help their struggle to be a little bit better as far as engagement and participation.
Okay.
So that person who's there and he's playing with the toys, his attendance may be better than the one who is not, but his attendance may still be lower than the one that's actually independent and engaged all the time. So we may even see that 96% bump up to 98% with their attendance. I mean, you never know. So let me stop sharing. It's 5:03. I appreciate you guys immensely. I appreciate you, coming in. We had a little conversation on the side, but thank you for being on time. Thank you for the norms of collaboration and being respectful of each other and being engaged and being present. Really appreciate that. Again, I appreciate your time, because time is one of those things you don't get back. So when you give your time, I do not take that lightly. You all do have, you will have Starbucks gift cards coming from me. Now, I don't want to hear no shaking heads. You know, I don't, is he going to have, look, Nathan said, I'll take whatever gift cards that you are declining, I'll have those. And I do things big, so you're not gonna get no $5 Starbucks gift cards from me. It's gonna be, yeah, rub your hands together, Nathan. It's gonna be worth your while, because I know you got that young one running around too.
Hey, Nathan and I got some more gift cards coming because we won that little race league, the Rockets.
Congratulations! It's over already.
Yeah, we were like, we're the top dogs, put it that way.
Oh my gosh! Congrats.
Yeah, this
Thank you.
This is the last week of it.
And I appreciate you all. Be blessed. Stay safe, because the cases are getting they're getting the more cases popping up, and y'all got young kids. My kid ain't young, so I ain't gotta worry about that. So, but I do have to watch out for myself. So just be mindful, be careful. I will be, I'll just shoot y'all a little email or something. I know everybody, if I don't see you, have a blessed vacation and a blessed Thanksgiving. Appreciate you all, love you all, and I love being you guys' teammates. So have a blessed evening.
We appreciate you and love you too. Thanks for choosing us.
Wouldn't have it no other way.